What's up, you guys? Jalen Hawk here, as always, with weekly anime manga reviews, and I'm here with another video. So today we're going to be covering the video that I was planning on talking about for a while now, and that is Kaneki. How strong is he in comparison to other Tokyo Ghoul characters, and also how strong is Kaneki currently in the Tokyo Ghoul series? Because this has been a question that a lot of people I've seen debate and talk about, mainly when they're comparing Kaneki to people like Furuta or Arima or etc. Who is the strongest person in TG. And I've kind of made a poll on Twitter, and I've also made my thoughts very clear on Twitter who I think is the strongest person in TG. So I'm not going to beat around the bush about it. I'm just going to be very blunt and just say I strongly believe that Kaneki is indeed the strongest person in Tokyo Ghoul that we currently know of. Not counting characters that we don't really know a whole lot about, like Shikare apparently, who has absorbed a bunch of dragon spores, or Tsuneyoshi Washu, because apparently in his youth we know that he was capable of taking out several triple S rated ghouls, very similar to the way how Arima has been showcased to be, and also someone like the original One Eyed King, we don't really know anything about him, so we can't really say anything on that lines either. So let's continue on. Now, why do I believe Kaneki is indeed the strongest person within the Tokyo Ghoul series? Now, Kaneki is the main character in a lot of different series, not every single one. The main character tends to usually end up becoming the strongest. Now, this isn't really enough, I guess, solid proof to kind of say that Kaneki indeed is the strongest Tokyo Ghoul character, but I would definitely say that it is kind of a leeway into people probably agreeing with me a little bit, and actually let me talk about some of the things that Kaneki has done. Now, one thing I do want to bring up regarding Kaneki is the fact that Kaneki is very special within the Tokyo Ghoul world. He's very unique. There's very few people in the world that are like him. The only other person that I can really think of is Shikare or Rize. More Rize than Shikare, though. Kaneki happens to be one of the nucleuses of Dragon. He also has Rize's Kakaho within his body, and because of having that Kakaho, Rize, as a normal ghoul, a person who is part of the Washu branch family, she's part of the Washu branch family, was already considered abnormally strong in comparison to other ghouls. She has very high regen as a ghoul, and she's just very strong in comparison to other full-fledged ghouls. I would actually say that I do believe that Rize, within part 1, based off of what people used to say about her, like Yamori, like Eto, many members of Aogiri Tree, the fact that they wanted a hold of her, not to mention she was a member of the Washu family, I wouldn't be surprised, and especially what Kaneki was capable of doing without really any that much training whatsoever immediately when he turned into white-haired. I think Rize was probably around that level, which would make Rize about a double S rated ghoul if you're scaling her off of Kaneki, but this is not an accurate assumption. But Kaneki, even at that point in time, was considered very, very strong. Plus, you have where he goes through the Hunter Dragon process. He ends up becoming a nucleus. He's an artificial half ghoul, and half ghouls in general already have kind of a buff in comparison to normal ghouls. In comparison to normal ghouls, plus he has Rize's Kako inside of him, so him as a half ghoul is just kind of he's really freaking high up there, and it's just he's just very lucky. Not to mention, characters like Dr. Kano have stated that Kaneki is indeed one of the few artificial half-ghouls that he made who happened to be perfect. The only other people that he said this about was indeed Takizawa. You can assume that Furuta is indeed a perfected ghoul as well, thus making him technically the third perfection made by Dr. Kano, though we don't really know if Furuta... I don't remember if Furuta ever said that the Rize Kakaho that he got came from Kano, but it's heavily implied since they were indeed working together. Another character who might be a perfect half-ghoul as well would be someone like Amon, after he went back into that tank thing and then his arm regenerated back and now he's very strong. He's probably a perfected half-ghoul, but characters like Kurna, Nashiro, and the failed half-ghouls that we've seen are considered quote-unquote floppies or failures. So, yeah. Now, Kaneki. After Dragon and everything that went down there, Kaneki already to begin with, when he was Heisei Sasaki and, became the Black Reaper, red-haired Kaneki, Akaneki, whatever you want to call him, he ended up fighting Arima. He was trained by Arima as well, and we see that he's able to hold his own against Arima. Not necessarily stronger than him, because if you read that fight carefully, it is very obvious that Arima is indeed stronger than Kaneki. And Kaneki even brings up the fact that after, Arima got, his owl broken, and Arima proceeds to still fight Kaneki, Kaneki's kind of just I need to be able to just completely disarm him in some type of way, because even with a broken Quinque, I might still lose. And then Arima says the whole entire thing about like, oh yeah, I could have killed you like 700 or 673 times, all that stuff. So at that point in time, Arima was clearly superior to Kaneki. You can kind of debate otherwise, but I've like, if you go back to the chapter, it's pretty obvious that Arima had the ground. I'm not gonna, like, this video isn't really meant for like, oh yeah, who's stronger between Kaneki and Arima. It's more like a power scaling video on Kaneki. But yeah, but if you go back to the Arima fight, Kaneki was already relative to Arima back then, and he was already suppressed at that point in time. He was going through, like, he had suppressants in his body, all that other stuff, due to the fact that he was working under CCG, so he wasn't able to really access his full power. He wasn't cannibalizing. The only other person that he cannibalized, which I believe was about a few months prior, was Eto. And then you have where he fights Arima, ends up getting white hair and becomes the One-Eyed King, all that other crap. And then you see Kaneki not really fight for a while until the whole entire Suzuya and Abra situation where he had to fight two people with like perfected Arata armors. And in that situation, one thing I do want people to kind of realize, and one thing that I feel like the fandom kind of seems to not really get, and it's like, it's not even like the whole fandom, it's like kind of like half of it. It's like half of the people realize like, oh, Kaneki clearly was stronger than them. It's just that he was malnourished, and Furuta kind of implies like what happened in the situation wasn't that for like Suzuya and Abra individually are stronger than Kaneki. No, Furuta expressively says that, oh, the fight could have gone either way. You were really a monster, you know, associate special class. If you kept, like, if you didn't slip up that one time, you probably could have beaten Suzuya and Abra, but you messed up. You made a mistake, and that is what causes you to lose. And then you have where Kaneki goes through the dragon process. He gets out. You have where he seemingly has unidentified organs within his body, according to Kimi. We see that his original like scaly Kagure-esque hands that he had for like a while in the series after the, I believe after the Eto fight was the first time we saw it, and then after the Arima fight we see it like again. But after this, his hands like automatically heal, so he has like ridiculous regen at this point in time. We see him fight Furuta. During the fight with Furuta, you see that he's doing a lot of crazy stuff. He has like this weird Kagune form. I don't like. Okay, I'll tackle the Kakuja thing in a moment. Because that whole entire thing is weird. But you see that he's fighting Furuta. Furuta's beating him down like in his own Kakuja that kind of looks like sort of like a Cyclops. He's just beating him down. Kaneki's like getting injured and stuff, but he does overpower Furuta and all that stuff. So, and we also see him fight straight up against like the Oviduct like dragon, which is kind of like the dragon that Kaneki was, but to like a way smaller scale. Even though he did get injured very badly in that fight and he almost nearly died, he did end up winning and beating Rize in that situation. But let's talk about Kaneki v Furuta, because I feel like that part of the fight, the whole entire scaling aspect of Kaneki is kind of weird there, because it makes a lot of people kind of wonder, okay, how strong is Furuta in comparison to other people like Arima? How strong is he in comparison to Kaneki? Was Kaneki just vastly stronger than Furuta, or what? Like, what was going on there? So, when it comes to base, it is very obvious that Furuta is superior to Kaneki. Not necessarily in the way where Kaneki is extremely, you know, inferior to Furuta, but he is, like, he's relative to him, but Furuta's stronger. Kaneki even admits this. He says, like, in every type of way, when it comes to intelligence, when it comes to strength, you are stronger than me. And you have where Kaneki's fighting Furuta, like, Furuta stabs him in the mouth, and Kaneki, like, bites down on it, which, is, like, gives you, like, this really cool panel of Kaneki just biting down the freaking blade. That's, like, if I had to make a top 10 like favorite Kaneki moments like in combat or just like overall in general, that scene would probably be on it. That's like by far my favorite moment like of the Furuta Kaneki fight. But you also have where, you know, Kaneki does like a really cool maneuvers, like he creates like this Kagune Quinque blade out of his Kagune, like he pulls it out and then he fights against Furuta. That was really cool. You also have where his regens like off the freaking chains, because you have where Furuta beats down on Kaneki like a lot in the fight. Like you have where he like cuts Kaneki in his neck. You have where he actually literally beats down on him like with his Kagune. Kakuja, more like it, and he even stabs him in the mouth. But Kaneki, by the very end of the fight, all of his wounds are healed, and he has like a couple of like cuts and like scrapes on him, but nothing like too bad. Like it doesn't look like he's fatally wounded at all. So Kaneki's regen is pretty high up there. Probably the best in the story. Not to mention, you also have other characters in the story who have been shown to be able to regenerate from certain things, and I'm pretty sure that Kaneki at this point in time, since Rize's regen was already considered kind of like ridiculous prior to Dragon, I'm pretty sure Kaneki can do all the same things. Like Eto, capable of regenerating her head. Obviously, this took a while for this to happen, but her head did regenerate, and seemingly she is fine. We don't really know Eto's fate by the end of the story, but if I had to assume, I'm pretty sure she's still alive. You guys can debate about that in the comic section. But you also have Noro being able to be split, like, open, like, directly in half. Kaneki's got his limbs cut off several times. You have where he's gotten stabbed in the head by Arima. In the dragon fight, you have where he literally gets crushed in between two of Dragon's teeth. Like, Kaneki's regen is ridiculous. Like, the things that he has survived is not physically possible, like, as a person or, like, a normal ghoul. Like, Kaneki's regen is by far the best in the story, with the exception of possibly Rize currently, as Dragon's other nucleus, or even Shikare, but we don't know anything about Shikare as of right now. Now, going back to the whole Kakuja thing. Okay. You have where Furuta goes into his Kakuja. You have where Kaneki fights up against him. Kaneki, like, he gives this whole entire speech about, like, oh yeah, despite you being better than me in every single different ways, I want to create a world where ghouls and humans can live peacefully, and I have to defeat you in order to do that. And then you have where, like, he releases his Kagune. He has, like, this Kagune-esque armor, like, on his chest and, like, around his body, like, around his hands and stuff. You have where, like, he has, like, these large wings coming out from behind him that, like, form, like, these really cool blades that look like that they're, like, from, like, a holy story with, like, freaking, like, divine blades of wrath or something. I don't know. But, like, they look really cool. And he fights Furuta. Now, we don't know what this is. According to the Tokyo Ghoul Wiki, they have it listed as Kaneki's Kakuja. One thing I have said multiple times, I said in my video yesterday, Kaneki, like, the Tokyo Ghoul Wiki is not an accurate source of information. It is relatively accurate to a degree, but you're better off looking at the manga and being able to figure out things from your, like, from the what the manga straight up tells you than the Tokyo Ghoul Wiki, where I have personally gone on there and changed some things that they have messed up. Like classifying Dragon, like normal Dragon, as a form of one of Kaneki's Kakujas, even though that isn't really a form he can go into at will. It's something that requires a lot of different things. Dragon as a whole is just kind of a separate entity. It's not technically a Kakuja at all. And this form that we see of Kaneki, I don't know if it can be classified as a Kakuja. I would say no, only because of the fact that all Kakujas that we've seen in the story have some type of mask. Whether it's defined or not, it has some type of mask. You have where Noro is like turns into, like, literally a mouth. So his Kakuja as a whole is just very different. Furuta gains a mask. He gains, like, a giant bulbous eye, and he goes, like, pure black from what it looks like. He's, like, silhouetted out. You know, Uta doesn't have a face, but he still has a mask on, like, on, you know, the upper half of his face, like this, where you only can see his mouth. And then, like, Yoshimura and Eto, like, their Kakujas are also very different, but they still have a mask. Like, this has been the case for every single Kakuja, with the exception of, like, Noro, because Noro's Kakuja is just very odd. Kaneki, the only problem with this is, if it is indeed Kaneki's full capabilities as a Kagune, it's still very weird that he would not, in a fight like this where he's actually struggling and seemingly is on the losing side, why would he not go into his Kakuja? Is it because he's afraid to lose himself, or is it just because he doesn't have one, which is very hard to believe after all the people that he has consumed? So, I can say, I would say that this probably is Kaneki's Kakuja, and because of everything that's happened with Dragon, his Kakuja is just very different. Since Kaneki as a whole, everything regarding about him is different, so it could be a Kakuja, and it could also not be. So if you want to say that, whatever, it's kind of up to you. I don't really know. But yeah. Now, continuing on, though, back to the fight. This version of Kaneki completely overpowers Furuta. You have where Furuta's in base. He's fighting Kaneki. Kaneki's just whooping him, cuts off Furuta's arm. He's overpowering him. And you even have where, like, Furuta, like, he's bleeding out and is kind of, like, on the losing side. And he's getting visually angry, and he forces himself to go into his Kakuja. That version of Furuta starts beating down on Kaneki. Kaneki's getting a little bit injured, but not to the point where he's going to lose. And then Furuta kind of like snaps into like a state where he like thinks about Rize and a potential family he could have had with her. Kaneki stabs him in the side and then ends up causing Furuta to end up, eventually dying. Plus, you have this version of Kaneki with the blades take on literally Dragon Rize. Like, obviously, it's not as big as the dragon that Kaneki became and was like attacking the city and shit, but it's the Obduct version of Dragon. You have like there's these giant bulbous heads of like Rize with hair and shit that Kaneki is fighting and is beating, mind you. Like, if I had to give you like a size scale of what Dragon Rize's like bodies, like the cognates that I was forming in comparison to Kaneki, right? So this is obviously a cartridge for a Pokemon game. Think of this as Kaneki, right? Then you have a Nintendo Switch. This is Kaneki in comparison to like the freaking dragon things. Like, it's a huge difference in size. It's ridiculous. Like, they're hundreds of times the size of Kaneki, yet Kaneki is beating them and overpowering them and using his blades in different ways. He has all 4 RC types. You see him use like Nishio's serpent tails to like block an attack. Then he like uses Tsukiyama's like Kokaku ribbon blade to like cut off one of the dragon heads. Then he also has his like just normal Renkaku. And then once he gets like, closed up by the teeth of dragon, uses pretty much Toka's wings, which his Ukaku wings seem very different in comparison to like a normal Ukaku. Like, normal Ukaku wings, obviously they have like 3 forms, depending on like what your RC type is or whatever, like your inherited abilities. You have like the normal form that is like a hardened form that's like crystal. You have like the one that's kind of like protruding like a normal cognate out of your back, which you see characters like Yomo, and I believe what's it called? I'm thinking of another character. Yoshimura and Eto also use, which is like the hardened, cognate-esque form. You have the form that's like a blade, which you see Ayato do, where he's like hardening it. You have the crystallized form, which I believe I started with, which we've seen both Ayato and Toka both use. And then you have like, if you like the other form, whereas it's kind of like a normal cognate. You see it come out of Yomo and Toka. And then, like, you see, like, the electricity build up, and they release, like, their electrokinesis. Plus, you also have the gaseous form, which Toka has also used. And Kaneki's more takes the appearance of, like, the gaseous form. Of the gaseous form, my bad. I thought I stopped recording. I was supposed to be mad. But of the gaseous form, right? And he just kind of, like, releases something, and it takes out Dragon and just, like, annihilates everything until he goes to the main body and, kills Rize. Now, the way I was drawn here, like, obviously we're gonna have to wait for the anime to get to this point in order to tell what exactly happened. But from what it looked here, you kind of see sparks and stuff, so I can't tell if he used shards or if he used some type of form of electrokinesis, which, if Kaneki has electrokinesis, that's ridiculous. That's crazy. But, yeah. But besides that, Kaneki, by far the strongest person in TG, with the knowledge of someone like Arima and the fighting capabilities of someone like him, not to mention to go up against a prodigy like Furuta, a Washu prodigy like Furuta, and beat him eventually. And plus he has like, the dragon and like crazy healing. Kaneki's by far the strongest person in Tokyo. Like, I can't really see how you can argue otherwise. I don't see how Arima would be able to beat Kaneki at this point in time. I don't see how someone like Furuta would be able to. Shit, we saw Furuta fight him and lose. Though you can argue and say Furuta was conflicted, but I still think that if the fight continued, Kaneki would eventually overpower him. And you also have where like Dragon Rize is like the only other person that I could see beating Kaneki and nearly did, but it was just because of like Kaneki's willpower that like overpowered him and allowed him to go through. Plus, plot was kind of in place for some of these fights, if we're being real. So, yeah, that's kind of all for this video. Thank you for watching. Remember to comment and subscribe as always. I know this video is a little bit all over the place, but I hope I answered your question on how strong Kaneki is. I don't plan on making a video, like a top 10 video of the strongest ghouls in TG, because, like, that's kind of, like, subjective, and there's a lot of things you have to account. But I can definitively say that, like, characters like Kaneki, like Arima, like Furuta, Eto, Rize, Rize as dragon, like, the dragon host, are definitely the strongest characters in the series. And I would also say that, like, some of the clown members and also, Yomo and Taki and Amon are also very strong as well. So, in Kaiko. So, that's kind of all for this video. Thank you for watching. Remember to comment and subscribe as always. I love you all. Suggest some other videos down below that you guys would like me to cover. And as always, guys, Jalen Hawk signing out. See you guys. Bye.